And I think this one is a little bit of a disruptor right now. Until we get those interest rates back down a bit, it's here to stay for a while. And how can we work around that and still stay profitable without giving away too much, still stay profitable with fewer jobs potentially?
Hey, welcome back to another episode of HVAC Success Secrets Revealed with Thaddeus and Evan, where we have good conversation with good people, and any good conversation worth having is worth having drunk. I realized I did not grab my fancy cup, and I'm going to pull an Evan and drink out of my shitty water bottle this time. So, but hey, look, it's got a sticker with a mustache. So, cheers, buddy. Uh, I just got going with our guest beforehand, chatting a little bit about some of the profit things. I'm actually been excited for this conversation since we were on her podcast. Talked a little bit about some of the marketing side of things in helping home service businesses with their profitability, but also now having her come on our podcast and some of the knowledge that one Diane Gardner is going to bring to the show. So a little bit about Diane, in case you're wondering who the heck she is. Well, she is a best-selling author. She's a Quilly Award winner, which is based on one of her first books that had Dan Kinney involved in it. She's a Profit First certified master from the one Mike McAllowitz, in case you've heard of his name before. She's very passionate about helping home service businesses maximize profits and stop overpaying for taxes. One of the topics that we're going to get into will be that. In terms of making money now, what in the tax planning, but really when I asked her why she specialized in home services. Well, her dad was an electrician. Might be stealing this story from you, so I'm sorry, Diane. But her dad was actually pretty bothered when she became an accountant, and she really wanted to help home service businesses because they're great at what we do and great at what they do, but they're not. And this, by the way, just isn't home services. I think this is just businesses in general, not great at running a business profitability. And one of her superpowers, when I asked her that, was how to spot hidden profit leaks. So stay tuned to that part of the show when we get into talking about the hidden profit leaks that we're going to have. So excited for today's episode.
Yeah, and I think it's very timely when we look at, especially for HVAC, right? The summertime is money time, right? The phones are ringing, people are wanting services, and it's an opportunity now to make sure that you're managing the profits appropriately and can manage your expenses appropriately throughout the summertime. When money's coming in, it's a lot easier to spend it. So let's pay attention to those profit leaks, and I'm excited for the conversation.
No, it's going to be great. But of course, today's episode would not be possible without our lovely sponsors, and in no particular order: Chirp, Service World Expo, Elite Call, and On Purpose Media. So let's rock and roll with those guys first. So join us at the most magical contractor experience at the Service World Expo in Orlando, Florida, this fall in October, the 15th to the 17th. You got keynotes, breakout sessions, 4-hour workshops. That's new this year, by the way. Social mixers, an exhibit hall with some great products. And guess what? They got a podcast hall. We're going to be there. We'll see you there. Network with other residential contractors and hear from some amazing keynotes that are all designed to help contractors like you elevate your business. Register now and use the promo code SECRETS100 for $100 off. Visit serviceworldexpo.com and register today.
And we have Chirp. Transform your home service business with Chirp, the ultimate automation toolbox. Capture more leads, connect instantly, and skyrocket your sales. Chirp integrates seamlessly with platforms like Service Titan, House Call Pro, offering automated texts, phone calls, emails, and even ringless voicemails. One of my favorite features is the abandoned call feature. So being able to take advantage of those abandoned calls that you didn't even get a chance to book, and they're able to send out a text message and get those appointments on your calendar. Schedule your demo today and get an exclusive 25% off your first 3 months. Visit chirp.com/HSSR to start boosting your revenue today.
Cool. In case you don't want to leverage text messages, you want the good old voice, well, check out the folks over at Elite Call, because they outbound your database to fill your dispatch boards with lucrative service and sales appointments and boosting your membership. They are a US-based call center that for over 20 years, their teams don't just make calls, they directly integrate appointments into your CRM and fill your job boards. So don't let your competition get ahead. Let Elite Call connect with your customers first. Visit elitecall.net to learn more today.
And If you're just not showing up online and you want more new customers coming into your business, enhance your online presence with On Purpose Media, your go-to home service marketing expert. Everything from web design, SEO, and PPC, stunning user-friendly websites built to convert visitors into phone calls with enhanced visibility on Google and effective pay-per-click advertising. Stop wasting your ad spend. It's a huge issue, especially in the summertime. And we got a really, really, really cool solution, especially for Service Titan users right now, to be able to minimize that wasted ad spend. So go ahead and check out onpurposemedia.ca for more information on that and book your call today.
Cool. And I don't know why I thought about this, but when I think about Diane, money, 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 money. Welcome, Diane, to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm looking forward to this.
Cool. Well, let's actually we didn't I'm just going to ad lib this one out. I'm going to go for it. So let's vent here for a second. Good or bad? What's on your mind? What is something that you want to vent about in the home services industry, either good or bad? Well, that's a tough one. I know. That was just like random right off the bat. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Let's go with it.
That's to you, Diane.
Yes. I know. I'm thinking, what do I want to vent on? I will vent on the increased interest rates that are causing my clients, my coaching clients and accounting clients, to lose sales because their customers aren't qualifying for the packages that they were qualifying for last year. And it is making a difference. Even though it's busy season, their sales are down because of that.
So
it's really frustrating when it takes away sales and it's not even something that you can control.
Right?
Yes. Out beyond your control, nothing you could really plan for. And I know my clients have been having to pivot and come up with other financing companies to work with in the effort to be able to take care of, especially the larger jobs that before would have been a no-brainer. Now it's causing people to have to stop and think and figure out how can we get them qualified.
Well, that's an interesting point. Like other financing providers, how many financing providers do you have at your disposal to be able to work with individuals to be able to make sure that they can do what they need to do within a reasonable amount? And that's a key thing, to have multiple finance providers for any business.
And I think this one is a little bit of a disruptor right now. Until we get those interest rates back down a bit, it's here to stay for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we work around that and still stay profitable without giving away too much, still stay profitable with fewer jobs, potentially?
I have a feeling we're going to get into that topic sprinkled in throughout the show, but let's walk it back a little bit and let's actually start with a little bit into your journey and why you wanted to not go into the trades, following your dad's footsteps, even though your dad protested that you probably should, but you started your journey as an accountant instead.
So I started my journey as an accountant because I was good with numbers, and that's probably not the best reason to become an accountant, but it was mine way back when I was young and dumb and didn't know any better. Walked the traditional accountant role for many years. Hated my business. I had clients whipping me around. I was black and blue all the time because they weren't nice people. And 2010 changed my life. In addition to losing a bunch of people because they went out of business, it caused me to sit down and take a hard look at my business. Do I like my business? No, I would have sold it for $1 back then. I hated my business. Well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? You have a choice. You're sitting here with, about 60% of the clients you had a year ago. What are you going to do with that? And how are you going to come out the gate different? So with that became my journey of how can I move away from being a boring, white, vanilla, boring accountant and turn my business and my world and my life into something where I can bring more value, a higher level of value to these small business owners that need it. So I specialize in all my home service businesses, my roofers, my plumbers, my HVAC, electricians, landscapers, those kind of people, because they're great at what they do, but not so much on how to do it profitably.
Mm.
And that has been an amazing journey. And along the way, I've met some really incredible people. The first one you can see over my shoulder is Mike McAllowitz with Profit First.
Mm-hmm.
That program changed not only my life, but has changed my clients' lives as well.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of want to unpack a little bit about the Profit First, but I'm a fan of Mike McAllowitz, and I actually like that he reads a lot of his own book, like the audio, the books of it, and it's actually funny when you listen to how he interacts with it, because he adds in little quips, and like I just love the little laughter that he has in the stories. He's like, and here's an anecdote, or side story, not even in the book, but phenomenal author in terms of some of the stuff that he's done. He actually was. I can't remember the one. It's the precursor to EOS. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it's the one where you take a 2-week sabbatical from your business. You probably know the one I'm talking. I'm drawing a blank on the name for whatever reason. Clockwork. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, Clockwork.
So Clockwork, when he did that, like that phenomenal concept to be like, hey, go take 2 weeks off of your business and don't touch a single thing with inside of it. Not a lot of people can do that. But let's go back to the Profit First, because it's up there. It's on the top left of your screen, or right, I guess, depending on maybe the mirrored view of when you're watching this. But it's on the top of your screen. So walk us through a generalized concept in bringing down Profit First, but also how this relates to, you have a book right now, the 9 profit boosting tactics that's on the website. They're your path to profits, and there's 9 of them in there. We're not going to cover all 9 on the show, so you have to go to our website. We'll drop that at the end of the show to be able to get the book, to be able to listen to all of them and grab all of those. But the first one is choose to be profitable. I think this probably ties into Profit First a little bit. So let's walk through that.
It does, Thaddeus, and thanks for starting there. I think most service business, or I'm just going to say most businesses owners, it doesn't matter what kind of a business it is, don't even think about the concept of that they can have a plan that will allow them to be profitable. School and the life of hard knocks has taught us that sales minus expenses, whatever's left over, if there is anything left over, we as an owner might get it. And I will tell you, the first many years of my own business, there was crumbs left over, literally crumbs. And I kept thinking, why am I working so hard? I'm not getting anything out of this. Why am I working so hard? And it wasn't until I myself found Profit First that my own business got transformed, which is why I'm so adamant about it, sharing it with my home service clients and coaching clients. Because the whole concept behind Profit First is, let's work off of the amount of money that you really have to spend. When we look at our bank account, and I'm going to use round numbers for easy math, and it says we have $50,000 in the bank account. Well, in reality, 15,000 of it belongs to your employees because you got to make payroll on Friday. Maybe there's another 5 of that is payroll taxes, so that's 20 of it. And we've probably got some sales tax or something out there that needs to be paid. So let's just say, for easy numbers, another 5. That's 25 of it. But wait a minute, we've got vendors out there that have to be paid. So now we're down to, maybe there's 10 of that 50, but wait a minute, there's income tax you owe on that money. So maybe now we're down to 5,000 of that 50 is really available to be spent. But we look at our bank account and go, there's $50,000 in there. I'm going to go buy whatever it is we want to go buy, and not thinking about, in a few days or in a week or in a small period of time, we're going to have to put this other money out there. So the concept behind Profit First is to set up multiple bank accounts. We have our operating account. We'll have a profit account where you as the owner get to take in a reward for taking the risk of being in business and being the CEO of your business. A tax account where we can always pay our income taxes and we're not going to get in trouble with the IRS or your state. And then from there, we may have an account for cost of goods. Maybe it's your materials and your subcontractors. We put them off in a separate account so you can always pay your suppliers. Maybe there's an account for emergency, so that when something like COVID hits, or an earthquake or a flood or something like that, we can still have some money to keep our business going. Maybe there's an account for seasonality, especially in HVAC world. You guys are so seasonal. You're making hay right now because the money's flowing in. But what about January, February, March? Unless you're up in the cold country where I live, where now they have heating they can do, some states don't get that little bump in the winter there. So let's have a seasonality account where we're pulling money away right now while that money's flowing in, and we use it to carry us during those slower months. Or maybe we need a future growth account. So when we buy that next truck or van or hire that next employee, we've already got some money sitting there, whether we pay cash for it. I like to see 3 to 4 months of somebody's salary sitting there before we hire somebody. That way we know we can pay that salary. We're not stressed out. Oh my goodness, I added another person to payroll. How in the world am I going to make that payroll now? And then you end up letting the person go potentially a few months later because you just can't squeeze the payroll. We've been practicing. We've got that payroll. We're doing it every pay cycle, putting it in there. So that it's limitless on what you can set your accounts up to do. And each time we do that, we make this business more and more and more successful and more profitable.
And then looking at that, I mean, it's also reverse engineering that a little bit too, to say, okay, well, how can I, if I want to have a 20% net profit at the end of the day, well, what do I need to charge to be able to hit those numbers that you've already set up in those accounts, which is another big thing. But you mentioned, and actually we were just on a mastermind with some other agency owners, and now we're a little bit more flat in terms of our revenue. Don't have the spikes in the busy season like an HVAC owner might have, but looking at and then one of the conversations was okay, well, how much cash in the bank should I have on hand? Now, obviously, a little bit different when it's seasonal. You've got to be able to factor in if you know that you're going to be slow for 4 months. Well, okay, you should probably have cash on hand to be able to make you through those 4 months, and then a little bit after that. Now, if you're fairly I mean, I don't want to say flat in revenue, but steady growth. You don't have the busy season, the slow season. You're fairly stagnant. What would you say somebody should have for cash on hand in their bank accounts to cover their expenses?
Usually I see somewhere between 3 to 6 months. So 3 more on maybe the slower end, 6 on the more seasonal kind of a business. Because sometimes the seasonality piece might be 3 or 4 months. And if you've got 6 put away, you've got some money as you're ramping back up, you can make full payroll and you're okay.
Perfect. I love that number. And I've been a fan of, for our business, I want to have 2 months. That's just depending on your risk tolerance and your cash flow.
It's your risk tolerance.
Yeah, risk tolerance and cash flow. And so I'm like, I'm fine with 2 months, but and that's a good part about the choosing to be profitable aspect of things. Evan, did you want to add anything into that before we go on to one of the other points, which is not point number 2? You have to get the book to get to point number 2.
And I do want to add something else too after Evan.
Sure.
The question I had was around memberships. Because that's something that, if a business is billing annually for that's work we're going to be completing in 6 months, 9 months, et cetera, when we're going out and running that tune-up call. How do you advise your clients to collect that money? Do you suggest setting up a separate account for that to then pay technicians out of that money? Is it something that you see as a loss leader for businesses where they're just trying to maintain that customer relationship? How do you see the membership, and then how do you advise one of your clients to actually manage that money?
What I typically see is a separate account and that membership money going into that account. So we're protecting it so that we do have the money to make payroll on it, because it seems like a lot of the services that come in that membership platform are provided during the slower months. Correct. So you can keep your team going. So we need money to offset the payroll for those slower months. And what better way to do it than to put that money over in a protected bank account?
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all about protecting these important pieces by putting them in separate bank accounts. And oftentimes, depending on the person and their self-discipline, we'll even suggest a different bank for every account. Make it inconvenient that I can't just pull up my phone because I've got 5 or 6 or 7 accounts in one bank and just a simple little swipe and pull it over to my main operating account. I actually have to either go to the bank or go log into their site and do a transfer. I have to do something that's put a little bit of friction in there and make that something you have to really stop and think about, a second thought before I just do it.
I
Protecting
love
that
that.
money as much as we
It's
can.
protecting yourself from yourself, right?
From yourself, yes.
Yeah.
Now, some people are really self-disciplined and they're fine having all the accounts at one bank, but most of us aren't.
Mhm.
Most of my clients, we will have them at multiple banks.
That's
Just to
interesting.
keep it
I'm
safe.
laughing because our bank, with the reason that we have our bank is because both of Evan and I on our personal side banked with that bank, and we got our corporate bank there because of ease of transferring money. But I
Which
think we're
goes
also
against
right. We're also
protection.
I feel we're fairly self-disciplined because like I have it on my personal side where like I just have auto things going into different accounts on my personal side,
Mhm.
and I forget about it. I'm like, oh shit, vacation time. Oh man, I got a lot of money in my vacation account. Sweet, let's go, because it just goes into there, right? Forget about it all the
Isn't
time.
that feel good though,
Mhm.
compared to the flip of that? Your wife or your family or kids, whoever, saying, we're going to go on vacation, and you're inside, you're panicking. I've promised them this vacation. How in the world am I going to pull it off? I better check to see if the credit card has enough on it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's a
that's a
panic.
completely
Yeah.
opposite side of that.
Yeah. So if
It's
that's
the
you,
stress.
don't do that. That's
Yeah,
bad.
don't do that.
That's
Yeah,
bad. So, um,
yeah.
moving into, sorry, go ahead.
Can I just, you had
Yep.
mentioned that we can actually plan for the amount of profit that we want.
Mhm.
And that goes right back to the profit first. We see an average of somewhere between 3 to 5% net profit on most companies when I find them. And I look at that and go, oh, here we go. Here's those little crumbs again. 3 to 5% net profit is nothing. But the national average is about 4 or 5. And so at least they're average. But our goal is to get those net profits up to 15, 20%. And people look at me up front and they go like, you are crazy. How are we ever going to get our profits to there? But when we're working off of what we call our OpEx or our operating account, and we've removed all those temptations, we are able to make better decisions. And you'll find that the profits will start increasing because you're making better decisions. And like you had mentioned earlier, Thaddeus, if we know we want, let's say, 15% net bottom line, we can reverse engineer what that top line needs to be. And then people like yourselves can help them get the leads and the stuff that they need to be able to hit that top line revenue. I can help them with the calculation to reverse engineer it, but I'm not your leads kind of person. I'm the one that'll help you protect your money, that'll help you look in the corners and under the sofa cushions and places like that in your business and find a bunch of other leaks that are sitting out there. As we always say, there is no neon sign going, find me, find me, find me, find me. They're hidden. You have
Mhm.
to go looking for them.
Well, and that kind of blends well, and I mean we've already talked a little bit about it in what story do your numbers tell? In really pulling that out to say, okay, well, you mentioned the 3 to 5% net, where it should be 15 to 20%. You know, that's a big story right there. I think a lot of times other people miss out the growth the gross margin and what's your gross profit as well, and looking at the numbers that the story that those numbers tell, and there's a whole bunch more numbers that. Stories that numbers tell. It's a tongue twister. Say that 10 times fast. That are in there. And so, what sort of things are you seeing, and what sort of stories are numbers showing you for the bad? Like when somebody comes to you like, oh shit, that is bad, and where does it need to go to be good or great?
One of the things I see all the time is they'll have 100% of their payroll down in their operating or overhead expenses. And so they come in and they go, look at my cost of goods is only 15%. And it's like, wrong. Let's pull your payroll cost up there. Let's get those payroll taxes and your workers' comp that goes along with that payroll cost of your production team. Let's get those guys reclassified up there where they belong. And then there's usually some other job costs that are hidden down there, but that's not the big number. It's that payroll number, getting it up there. And then once that happens, that number usually will jump from their 15 or 20 that they were so proud of to 40, 45, 50. And then they look at me like, oh my goodness, I had no idea, because they don't know their numbers. They're not aware of what's an overhead expense, what's a cost of goods sold expense. And they
Sure.
don't know how to tell the difference between the two.
Well, that's an easy layup question. How do you tell the difference between the two? It's funny because I actually I wrote that down before you said that, cost of goods versus operating expense, and I put people on there is one, but I think there's a lot of other things where people don't
There is.
necessarily know
Yeah.
what the difference between a cost of goods and an operational expense is.
So cost of goods is any expense that is incurred to be able to get a job completed. So it's not your rent, it's not your utilities, it's not your phone, it's not that kind of stuff. It's your materials, it's your subcontractors if you have any, it's your payroll and all the payroll related expenses. It might be those merchant fees that you're paying, your finance fees that you're paying so that you can get the job to close because they can't afford to pay for the job without some sort of finance, and we might shove those up there. We're looking for licenses and permits, dump fees, any of those kinds of things that are related to the jobs that you're doing. Now, they're not going to necessarily be in your quote when you're working up a quote or what you're pricing and stuff, but they're fees that have to be paid because you did this job. So anything related on that belongs up in your cost of goods sold. And that can blow that number up to be a way big number compared to what they want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, and somebody told me the other day that really the big way to look at this is the jobs. So, okay, if I had 0 customers right now, but I had a business and I had all these expenses, well, any expense that would be a result of me working with a customer is the cost of goods sold. If I had no customers and I still had all these expenses down, that's an operational expense. And so it's a good way to be able to break that down and look at that. And so something like a CSR, well, they're not a cost of good. They would be more of an operation, or
They're
it
more
could
of
be
an
both,
operational.
right? Yeah, and there
Yeah.
could be some blends too in that too, and you might as well. So
So one I see all the time, Thaddeus, is what about the owner? So I'm going to say you and Evan have a HVAC company and you're strictly in the office. Evan's out in the field maybe half of the time and he's doing whatever the other half of the time. So how do we break that out? So one of you, Thaddeus, you're overhead and Evan is maybe half. We put half of his salary in overhead and half up in cost of goods.
yep,
And that's one they don't think about either because a lot of times they're wearing a multiple hat. They're still out pushing jobs. They may not be doing the actual installs or whatever, but they're out in the field. And so we want to look at their time. How are they spending that time? And really pull that salary apart if we need to and put it where it needs to go so
yep.
that we get a truer reflection of what is their real cost of goods.
Well,
Because
and
if you weren't doing it, we'd have to hire somebody else to do it.
100%, and it's good to understand what those differences are. And like your bookkeeper or your accountant can also do a manual split on your QuickBooks, for
Mm-hmm.
example. And
They
basically,
can.
what that means is they if you have $10,000 in salary to Evan, and 5,000 is cost of goods sold, 5,000 operational expenses. Well, when they do your books and your profit and loss, they just manual split the two of those, so it shows up in 2 different areas. And so, getting really granular, I think, with somebody's chart of accounts and how you look at those things is super important for businesses. Now, here's another part though, because I just said chart of accounts, and some people are probably like, "The fuck is a chart of accounts?"
Will you let
So,
Evan answer that or don't you want me to answer it?
hi,
Evan's
anybody.
been quiet.
No, definitely not me. I'm not the finance guy.
No, this is why it's probably because he's been quiet. Because when he gets into the marketing ones, I'm kind of quiet. When it gets into kind of the numbers and the finance, I get going on it, and he gets kind of quiet. So it happens. It's a yin
So,
and a yang.
He bores me to sleep. That's all. So.
does he? Oh, I hope I'm not boring you, Evan.
I could have been an accountant at one point in my life.
Well, a chart of accounts is how accounting software separates everything out by codes or by words. So a chart of accounts will contain things like your sales, maybe any refunds or returns, discounts that you're giving out, which I'm hoping you're not doing much of that. Cost of goods sold is going to include your materials, your subcontractors, your production wages, the payroll taxes, the things we've just been talking about. Your operating expenses is going to include all your overhead kind of items. It's going to include your rent, your utilities, your advertising and marketing, your accounting, your other legal and professional fees, your software, office supplies, your insurances, all those types of things are going to land down in the overhead expenses. And traditional accounting says sales minus all those expenses equals your net profit. In Profit First, we say sales minus profit equals the expenses, because we want to plan our profit first and end up with here's how much is left to actually pay for all these expenses. But there's a kicker here. Somebody will look at their P&L and they're going to say, well, look at, I've got $100,000 net profit, but I've got 20,000 in my bank. Where's the difference? How come I don't have 100,000 in the bank? And that is because we've bought trucks, we've bought vans, we may have bought a building, we've got loan payments that go on those, and those items use up your cash. And so cash in the bank rarely, if ever, equals your net profit, because we do have those other uses of your cash. And I'm trying to really simplify this.
Well, yeah,
Not
no,
go in the
it's a
weeds.
great point, because I
Mhm.
can't remember the stat that Billy Stevens said when he came on the show, but there's a percentage of businesses, and it's really, really high, that go out of business even though they're profitable.
Yes. Oh, I see it a lot. They
Yeah.
might be
cash. It's cash flow versus net
cash
profit.
flow.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that's really great, and that's part of this whole point of unpacking the story. So how do we begin to unpack the story? We get this sheet with all the numbers on it. How do we begin to understand what the story is behind the numbers? That is the actual reality. You know, Thad just did a reel that we put out today that talks about facts versus feelings, right? So how do we avoid the feelings of what our money is telling us and start to dive into the facts and what the real story is behind them?
So I like to suggest that you work with an entrepreneurial accountant. And yes, there are such a thing out there. And somebody who actually will think of their own business like it's a real business. And they are actively looking for ways to help you understand that story, because it goes way beyond sales minus expenses equals profits. We really need to dig into what's sitting on the balance sheet, which is the balance sheet tells us what we own and what we owe, and then how much equity we might have in that business. Because then you start getting into the whole conversation, which is another topic that we won't touch today, is are we in a healthy enough of a business that we can even find financing? Because the banks are looking at it from a different angle than your accountant might be looking at it. Because accountants, we're always wanting to minimize your net profit so you pay the least amount of taxes. The bank's wanting you to maximize that net profit to show that you have enough equity in the business that you are financeable. So how do you handle that crossroads? And that's a topic for a different conversation. But there's all these different stories swirling around within your business. We've got to have sales. We've got to be profitable. Got to pay those taxes. But then people tell me, but if I make more money, I'm just going to have to pay more taxes. And I kind of go, yeah, but we do have strategies around that. But that's not a reason to stop making money, because you're going to have to pay some taxes. And so, but the stories all start getting jumbled in somebody's head. And then I think they go into some mindset, maybe some money mindset issues start taking root at that point.
And I happily pay more in taxes, because that just means that I'm earning more money. And generally speaking, I don't want to pay more on the same amount of profit, because then that's not good. In terms of the money mindset, though, I think this is a great topic and a great conversation. I think a lot of people have an unhealthy relationship with money, likely stemming from educational upbringing, and we don't need to get into the educational system and how it doesn't prepare people for financial hardships, or hardships isn't the right word, but or hardships or prosperity in the real world. So when looking at money mindsets, how does one break, let's say, a woe is me mindset, or well, I'll never make it, or the fact that when they look and say, okay, well, if I'm earning 50,000 this year and I all of a sudden earn 250,000, now they grow up to this 250,000. They're only capped at how much they're actually earning. What was the stat? They can only see themselves earning twice what they're currently earning, something like that. How does one break through that to be able to start to look at potentially earning more money?
I think a lot of times they end up having to do some coaching around that mindset. I see it all the time. They can grow their business to a certain point, but can't seem to get past that, and I'm using the word self-imposed ceiling. They can get their business, let's just pick on 500,000 versus $1 million. They can sit there at 500,000 and they're comfortable. They know what they're doing, and they're almost afraid to take that step to get to $1 million, because that's another big step. And a lot of it has to do with whether they have an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset. And getting from scarcity to abundance takes some work. It's not something you're going to wake up one morning and go, okay, today I'm going to have an abundance mindset, when you've been living in the world of scarcity. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of examining yourself and your beliefs. We all grow up with beliefs. There's people out there that have beliefs that, making a profit is somehow evil. Well, if you're a business owner and you were raised in that type of a home, you're going to have a hard time ever being profitable. Or that spending money to grow your business is somehow wrong. There's just so many limiting beliefs out there that we have somehow picked up along the way. How do we get through that? I know myself, I worked with a mindset coach for about a year to get through, because I could not seem to grow my business past a certain point. I tried so hard and couldn't get it past there. So once I realized some of my own limiting beliefs and faced them, then I was able to move on, and we do almost twice that now today, which is pretty cool when you look back at that.
Well, and here's the thing that I like about that is that you talk about being a profit coach for you and you having your own limiting mindset behind that, but then you went and sought somebody as a coach to be able to help you break through that. Well, now you have the power to be able to say, okay, well, I broke through that. I doubled where I'm at. Now I can also help you to be able to do that too. And I think that's a key distinguishing thing in there, that a lot of people don't actually go seek that help to be able to go break that down, to be able to change their story, to be able to understand the narrative, to be able to get through to that next level, which is super cool, super powerful.
I think a lot of people stay stuck, and they just keep digging the same hole year after year after year, instead of getting some help and letting somebody pull them up out of that hole. And that's what coaches are great for.
Yep. Well, what is it? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Yes.
Right. And so that's exactly it. If you're getting the same results all over every single time, you're not doing anything different. Well, then do something different. Right.
Especially in the world that we live in today. I mean, between YouTube and all the different podcasting places where channels that you can pick up information, you hop on Amazon, you can have a book in your fingertips within a day or two. I mean, there's so much information out there that it's almost like no excuse for not being able to get some help. It's there if you want it.
It's the lack of application.
It is.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. Well, we're about halfway through, so we want to make sure that we hit up our random question generator. One of Thaddeus' favorite parts of the show, where we ask a random question that has nothing to do with anything that we've been talking about so far. So Diane, you get to choose behind door number 1, 2, or 3. Which question would you prefer?
I'll take 3.
Perfect. It was the one I was going to read for you anyway, so you actually didn't know which one.
We never do that here.
Yeah, no, never. Is there anything that makes you far angrier than it should? What do you blow up at? What is it that just drives you nuts that really shouldn't?
Stupidity and laziness.
On your part or other people's parts?
Other people's part.
Oh, okay.
I can get on board with that.
Now you know what it's
when
like
you're
to work
willing
with
to try.
I was just about to say the same thing. Now it's just like working with Evan all day long.
There's a difference between somebody who may not be blessed with a lot of brains, but they're willing to try and they're learning, versus a person who is just flat out lazy and stupid and just wants their hand out and give me something.
Right.
Well, the political joke that I wanted to say there, but I will digress and hold that one in.
And so I thought, don't go any further.
No, I won't. I rein that in. I think my joke was well enough tasteful that it basically said it without saying it. So, uh, um, I love that. Anyways, let's dive. I know we're gonna skip over one of them just for the essence of time, because I think the last two that we're gonna talk about are a little bit deeper and in potentially longer of a conversation. So we're gonna jump to number 7 in the book. And I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but hey, you know what? We don't want to cover all 9 because you just got to go to her website and get the book. Is debt choking the life out of your business? And I think we alluded to this and touched on it ever so briefly in terms of, hey, I've got $100,000 on my profit and loss, but I've only got $20,000 in the bank account. And kind of briefly on that. And so looking at the debt conundrum that I think some businesses get themselves into, and we've had some, conversations with folks that have ran into that, right? And now they're in this world of debt and they're having a tough time getting out of it. What are you seeing in terms of debt choking the life out of a business?
First thing I see is mismanagement of credit cards. It's so easy. I want something, flip out the card, purchase it, and not really giving any thought as to how we're going to pay that thing off next month. In an ideal world, you use your card, you pay it in full. Use your card, pay it in full. And we just keep that cycle rolling. But not everybody does that. And I've seen clients, in fact, I've seen them with $100,000 worth of credit card debt.
Oof.
And you know what the interest rates are on those? I mean,
A
they're
lot.
huge. And then I see them with these quick payday type loans in their business because they mismanage their cash. And those guys are brutal. They're taking 20-30% interest every single week. They're pulling a payment out of that bank account. Now this business owner is crippled with their cash flow, which causes them to make another poor decision because they're just fighting the cash flow. They're not even looking at their whole business. They're fighting the cash flow game. And then half the time they go run out and they buy a new truck on top of it. Not a used one, a new one, because, a whole bunch of debt isn't enough. Let's have some more. And then they can't keep up on all those payments and they're a stressed out mess. They're working 18, 20 hours a day. Their family never sees them. They're not healthy. They're tired. They're just a mess because they started out with a couple poor decisions up front. And how do we get out of that? In Profit First, we take our profit account, and at the end of the quarter, when it's profit distribution time, we'll take maybe 5% of that profit account for the owner, and most everything else goes towards debt. And that's how we start paying down some debt. But I've seen this repeatedly over the years, those quick payday type, business loans that are out there. Those things are awful. And the businesses really, really, really suffer when they get sucked into that vortex.
No, makes sense. And are there ones that might not necessarily be as known that potentially could cripple a business? And obviously credit cards one, payday loans the other, vehicles on top of it. Are there some hidden ones that are out there that people might not necessarily realize might be choking the life out of their business?
Well, I'm going to flip over to the P&L side of things and look at the amount of interest that they paid in the year. I've got a couple clients that are paying maybe $200,000 a year in interest. Well, if we weren't paying that amount in interest, that would go straight to their bottom line profit and they'd have that cash to run their business and to run it more effectively. But because they're paying that big amounts of interest, it's causing the whole trajectory of their business to stall out. And it's hurting them because it's sucking up so much of their cash. So debt can be really, really dangerous in a business.
Oh,
I remember an episode that we had with Rodney Coop when we were at it was the new flat rates event.
Yeah, at Service World Expo.
At Service World Expo last year, yeah. That was exactly what he talked about in his business, was the debt that existed there. And as an entrepreneur, we fall into this trap of I'll just earn it. I'll just go figure out how to make more and make more and make more. And I know I've been guilty of this many, many times in my young business career so far. And it's crippling. And you think that you can continue to outbeat it and outpace it, and it catches up to you every time.
In my first business, I made the mistake of putting too much on credit cards. The cash flow wasn't flowing,
Right.
and I kept supplementing with credit cards.
Yeah.
It took me years to get those things all paid off. And now we have a policy. I mean, you pay that thing off.
Mhm.
It's dangerous because it allows you to make a decision that you potentially wouldn't have made otherwise.
It is true. I know a lot of people that do that, and I'm just like, how? Pay it off every month,
Yes,
every
pay it
time.
off every
Yep.
month.
hmm
Yeah.
Perfect. So now somebody's, they've chosen to be profitable. They're leveraging profit first. They've understood their stories. They've got, the numbers that they tell. They've minimized their debt. It's not choking the life out of their business. Now they're into making money. Now they've got good profit, good cash flow. Well, now what? What do they do when they start making good money to be able to minimize how much to pay old Uncle Sam, or in our case,
Right.
Trudeau?
Trudeau. Well, since I work primarily with all U.S. companies, we'll go with the Uncle Sam version of this.
Perfect. Good, because he's better than Trudeau.
Is he? I'm not sure. Okay.
I don't know. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So our tax rates generally for small businesses are a lot lower, but I digress.
So here in the States, by the time for most businesses, the income tax from their business is paid on their personal income tax returns. So by the time you pay your federal and your state taxes, it can be a whopping 45%. It's like, that's almost half of what we made we get to give to the government. So I don't think so. I've always said all my career here of working with tax planning is we have to pay the amount of tax that we owe, but nobody says we have to give the IRS a tip. They certainly don't deserve a tip. Tip is for good service, for great service, for going over and above. So let's not give them a tip. Let's pay that least amount that we actually have to pay. There's a lot of strategies that can be done with things like investing in a retirement plan in your business for your employees and for the owner becomes part of that owner's overall exiting the business with X amount of money sitting out there. For those businesses that are in the 4 to 5 million minimum on up, we have a wonderful strategy with a captive insurance plan where they can actually become their own insurance company and they can insure themselves for lots of things that you couldn't afford out on the open market. So I have a client right now working through this where we're actually insuring their top producing salesperson, because if they lose that person, it will really affect their business. And so we've got some replacement insurance in their captive insurance company. So they'll have the money to recruit and find another top performing salesperson when the day comes that this person leaves. Or maybe we want to insure against cyber. There's so much cyber threats out there anymore that none of us ever worried about. Even 10, 15 years ago, we didn't worry about that. Now it's there. Things that we can't insure for in the open market because we can't afford it. But you can pay a premium fee to your own insurance company. And yes, you'll pay claims out of your own insurance company. But over time, it becomes this wonderful investment platform out there for you, which becomes part of your retirement planning. So there are some amazing strategies that can be done, or we want to sell the business. There's some great tax planning strategies out there where they can keep more of their money. And I don't know if it works up in Canada or not, but down here in the States, we work within the IRS code. So I'm not familiar with Canadian tax code.
Yeah, most listeners are US based anyway. So, yeah. There's differences.
So there are
like
strategies.
you guys have the
Yeah.
Augusta Rule where we don't.
Yes. We love the Augusta Rule.
Yep.
And for those that are listening, the Augusta Rule allows you to rent your home out to your business up to 14 times in the course of a year, and to charge your business what you would pay to rent a conference center or something along those terms. The money that the business spends is a deductible deduction, but the money that you bring in personally is not a taxable part of your revenue. So it makes a nice little tax planning strategy. We can hire our kids, and that's a favorite one. You get two things out of that one. Not only do you get a write-off, but you get to teach your kids the value of money and the value of how to earn money and to be self-employed at a point where there's no risk for them. So we've got some great strategies that can bring that tax bill down to a manageable amount.
Evan, you were going to say something?
I was going to ask for specific examples, but she just gave two, so that's perfect.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the to elaborate on the Augusta Rule, but you did. So the reality is I think there's probably a lot of different strategies that one can apply depending on what their threshold is, and also where they're at in the financial picture and what their net profits actually are. Different strategies apply for different individuals. There is no blanket statement that says do this. Although if you are a business owner and you own your own house, you should definitely be doing the Augusta Rule. And if you have kids, you should definitely be paying them. In my opinion, I wish that those two things were available for us in Canada. I think we can pay our kids, but it's a little bit different of a ruling up here. I just wish we had the Augusta Rule because that would be phenomenal. I would definitely like that. But
we pay less in corporate tax anyways, so
that's true.
Do you?
Yeah. So generally, depending on where you're at, so for reference, the federal small business tax rate for income under 500,000 is 9%. I don't know what it is when you're above 500,000, and then provincially is different. So I'm in Alberta, so we have a 2% federal tax, or provincial tax rather, on anything under 500,000. So anything under 500,000, I'm only taxed at 11% of my net income.
That's not bad. And that's a gross income tax, not net?
Yeah. No, it is on net income.
It is net. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our tax rates for businesses are actually a little bit more favorable in Canada than some other places in the US. I mean, it's, what is it? 18% is the federal rate for net income tax, I believe, in the US, roughly somewhere around there.
It's 21% right now.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Scheduled to go back up to 35% in 2026, unless something happens.
Depending on electoral results.
Right. Yes. So perfect. Well, Diane, thank you for taking the time to chat with us. I know we went through some of those, not all of those, but of course, if anybody wants to get the rest of her book, you can actually get it on her website, Profit Coach for You, and that's the number 4. So Profit Coach for You. We'll put these in the show notes after for those listening later. If you want to check them out on Facebook, you can, facebook.com/tax coach for you. And if you have questions, hit her up via the old emails, diane@profitcoachforyou.com. But before we go, we have one final question here for you. And since you've been binge watching us today, you probably already know what it is, but I'm still going to ask it anyway. What is one question that you wish people would ask you more, but don't?
I would say how to save more money on taxes. Because very few people ask me that. I have to go looking for people who want to save money. They complain about it, but they don't realize that they could actually do something about it.
Right. And
other than complain.
Well, and that's that last part, right? I'm making money now. What? Tax planning and reaching out and asking those questions, right? I guess so we talked a little bit about the business side of things and saving money on taxes on the business side. You know, we talked about hiring children, Augusta Rule, some other things that are at play in there. What about on the personal side, on an individual side? Because I know that you probably specialize in businesses, but if you're like most accountants, you might handle the personal taxes for your clients. I don't know if that's the case or not. I know our accountant does both. But what are some ways to be able to, an individual side of things, save money on what they pay taxes individually?
Well, because I specialize in businesses, I do their business and their personal income tax. And the strategies that we tend to employ are aimed at the business, but felt on the personal level. There's a much smaller amount in the way of strategies for just an individual person who's not a business owner. You know, there are some charitable contributions, some things like that they can do. There's some various things that they can invest in that will give them some better rates of return, but it's a lot more limited than when you own a business.
Makes sense.
Hence why we play in the business side of things.
Right. Well, and it dovetails and it helps with that. I know, and like we talked about that with my accountant too, right? Like, okay, what's the business projected earn? How much you want to pay yourself? Okay, well, let's minimize how much you pay in all of it by implementing great tax strategies across the board. So, yep. Love it. Well, thank you, Diane, for taking the time to come on and chat with us. Happy to have you on. I know that you shared some great information here today for people on looking at their finances and deep diving into be more profitable in their business. And I think when they look at a profit first mentality and understanding the stories that the numbers can tell them, I think they're going to be well on their way to success in the business side of things by listening to this show with you today. So thank you for dropping all the knowledge that you dropped here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on your show. And I enjoyed when I had you guys on my show.
It was tons of fun. So thank you so much. And until next time.
Cheers.
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 Well, that's a wrap on another episode of HVAC Success Secrets Revealed. Before you go, two quick things. First off, join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/HVAC Revealed. The other thing, if you took one tiny bit of information out of this show, no matter how big, no matter how small, all we ask is for you to introduce this to one person in your contacts list. That's it. That's all. One person. So they too can unleash the ultimate HVAC business. Until next time, cheers.